Hello everyone, and welcome to our fun little study group for PP 5340, Introduction to Public Policy and Management. Today, we are digging into a really critical part of public policy, ethics. We're going to see how the moral tightropes that public servants have to walk can ripple outwards, shaping public trust and, in some really tragic cases, causing very, very real harm.
So yeah, think of this as a deep dive into some of the core readings you'd get for Section 9, Ethics and Public Policy. We are going to unpack the incredibly complex and, often conflicting moral world that public servants live in every single day. So here's our game plan. We'll start with the messy theoretical conflicts public servants are up against. Then we'll shift to see how we, the public, actually feel about them. After that, we'll look at the devastating, real-world consequences when these systems break down, figure out why they break down, and wrap up with one big question for all of us to chew on.
Okay, first up, we're diving into Dwight Waldo's foundational work, Public Administration and Ethics. This piece is so important because it just peels back the curtain and shows you what a chaotic landscape public morality really is.
Waldo uses this quote from Chester Barnard, and man, it just hits you, right? It perfectly captures this core tension. The very job of governing, of just keeping society running, can push people into these morally impossible situations. The stakes are just unbelievably high.
So here is the first big idea from Waldo. He draws this bright line between two kinds of morality. Think about it. An action that's a patriotic duty in the public sphere, like a soldier's actions in war, would be a horrific crime for a private citizen. This split immediately throws any public servant into a kind of ethical maze. When these two codes clash, which one are you supposed to follow?
To really drive this home, Waldo literally maps out a dozen different sources of ethical duty. But this isn't some neat little treasure map. No, it's more like a tangled spiderweb of competing loyalties, all pulling public servants in different directions at the exact same time. So first, you've got the big ones, right? The foundations. Your duty is to the Constitution, to the law, to the country, and to the ideal of democracy itself. Seems straightforward enough. But what if a law on the books seems to go against a core democratic principle? The conflict starts right there at the very top. Okay, then the obligations start getting a lot more personal. You've got loyalty to your own agency's culture, to your professional code, maybe you're an engineer or a lawyer with specific ethical rules, and then, of course, to your family, your friends, and your own personal conscience. Suddenly, doing the right thing for the country might put you at odds with your professional standards, or even your duties as a parent or a friend. And finally, the map zooms way out into these broader, more abstract ideas. A public servant might feel a duty to their political party, or to this vague idea of the public interest, or maybe to all of humanity, or to God. And here's the kicker, the key insight from Waldo. There's no official rulebook for this. No one tells you which of these 12 duties wins when they conflict. And that right there, that is the ethical maze.
So, if our public administrators are constantly navigating this ethical chaos, how do we, the public, feel about them? Well, our next reading, Public Trust in Government Administrators by David Houston and Lauren Harding, gives us some really fascinating answers.
This is the million-dollar question their research gets into. And what they find is that trust isn't this single, simple thing. Turns out we're all making two totally different judgments when we decide whether or not to trust someone in government.
Houston and Harding break it down like this. On one side, you've got competence. That's the rational part. It's basically asking, can they actually get the job done right? But then there's trustworthiness, and that's much more emotional. It's the gut feeling that they care, that they're on our side. And you can absolutely believe someone is competent, but not at all trustworthy. Or the other way around.
And when you look at the survey data, this split becomes crystal clear. A huge majority, over 3/4 of people, believe administrators are committed. That's a big vote of confidence for their trustworthiness. But, and this is a big but, when you ask about competence, half the public doubts they can even fix their own mistakes. It shows this massive gap between us believing they want to do good and believing they can do good.
So, what happens when you combine that messy ethical system with this really shaky public trust, and it all fails? Well, our next couple of readings, from Diaz's Getting to the Root of Environmental Injustice and Bullard and Wright's The Politics of Pollution, give us a pretty devastating look. These readings introduce a powerful concept, environmental injustice. This isn't just about a factory polluting the air. It's about who is forced to breathe that air. It makes it painfully clear that when policies and regulations fail, the consequences aren't shared equally by everyone in society. And the numbers? They're just staggering. Diaz's article points to a study that found that the financial penalties for environmental violations were 500% higher in white neighborhoods than in minority neighborhoods. 500%. That just screams of a massive disparity in how the rules are enforced.
And the piece by Bullard and Wright shows this isn't some isolated issue. They lay out a clear, heartbreaking pattern across the American South. Where do the landfills, the incinerators, the chemical plants end up? Disproportionately in black communities. Whether you're looking at Houston or Dallas or a tiny town in Alabama, the story is just tragically consistent.
And that leads to the most important question of all. Why? Why does this happen over and over again? Well, the sources argue it's not some random accident. It's actually the result of a very cold, very pragmatic political logic.
This quote is, well, it's absolutely chilling. It's from a real-life consulting report for the California Waste Management Board. It's not hiding anything. It is explicitly advising the government to target communities with less money and less political power because they're less able to fight back. The strategy is laid bare. Just follow the path of least political resistance.
And this chart shows you exactly what happens when you follow that logic. A U.S. government study in 1983 looked at the 4 major hazardous waste landfills in the South. And of those 4, a staggering 3 were located in majority black communities. You just can't deny that pattern.
So let's just pull all these threads together for a second. We started in the abstract, right? With Waldo's chaotic maze of ethics. Then we saw with Houston and Harding how fragile our trust is, especially when it comes to competence. And finally, with Diaz, Bullard, and Wright, we saw the real-world life-and-death consequences when those systems fail, and how those consequences land hardest on the people with the least power to fight back.
And this whole journey, from abstract theory to very concrete harm, it leaves us with this one final, really vital question. If the system is basically designed to take the easy way out, the path of least resistance, then whose job is it to change that path? Is it up to the public servants stuck in the maze? The politicians who write the laws? Or is it up to us, the citizens, to stand up and resist? It's a tough one, and it's something really important to think about.